You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players, and all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 141 of Arsenal Pass. Hayden Dale joined always by Mr. Brendan Patrick. This week on the pod, we're getting ready to wrap up the year, take a look back at 2023 and some important milestones, events and learnings in Flesh and Blood. Brendan, it's been a year. It's been I don't know, do you reckon this, everyone says like as you get older, like, oh, years go faster. Has this year gone fast for you, or has it kind of just been the same?
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I think you're 30 years old, right? I don't want to expose you on the pod,
as of
but
last month.
Yeah, I'm 29, I guess, going on 30. And I don't know, I've just been feeling that in general recently because I feel like it's all numbers and it's all semantics. It feels like in your 20s, you can kind of figure things out. But then as soon as you hit 30, it's like, oh shit, I actually have to do something with my life. And I feel like I'm on the cusp of hitting that period where I'm like, oh. But anyway, that leads into, it's gone by so fast and I'm almost 30 years old and I'm like, Jesus Christ, what am I doing with my life? So, yes.
Don't worry, it doesn't really change. It's the same. So I can leave you rest assured.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of, is that it's just the same. And I don't know. It's an interesting concept because... Yeah. I mean, like I said, your early 20s, like you really just figure stuff out. You get out of college, you do whatever. You're like moving around. You make these big changes and then I don't know, it just kind of hits you in the face. You're like, oh shit, I have to kind of think about like, do I want to have kids or like do it? It's like all this weird stuff. I don't know. Midlife crisis, basically.
Hey, save that for another 10 years. So on the pod this week, we are going to cast an eye towards 2024 as well, Brendan. We won't just be retrospective in 2023. We will look forward to 2024. Some more announcements have come out over the past week as well, which we're going to cover very soon on Organised Play for 2024, plus some changes that will impact kind of the start of 2024, especially around how ban and hint no longer suspended list works, which we will break into very soon. But yeah, also a little bit of a look at heavy hitters and a bit of a tiny taster for something coming in the next week on heavy hitters as well, Brendan. We've got a bit of something to tease. But anyway, I don't know. This week in Flesh and Blood, I mean, this is, as we said last week, the end of the off season. I personally haven't played any Flesh and Blood this week, Brendan. I don't know about you. I have watched a little bit though. I did watch a little bit of coverage, but otherwise no Flesh and Blood this week for me.
I mean, this week is mostly just spoilers, and I'm happy that they're doing spoilers kind of this way. I mean, I'm sure they're not going to do them this way. We're going to still get them in a 2-day period, but I do like when they trickle them out. It gives you more time to digest them, and you sort of like build this narrative as you get more cards slowly added. So I really enjoy that. So I've been enjoying looking at the spoilers. There's some that have definitely surprised me, to say the least. But I mean, Fab offseason is Fab offseason. Like, I don't know. It's a good time to take a break from the game after we come off the back of the Pro Tour and the World Championships.
Yep. Why don't we go straight into talking about the previews from this week briefly before we jump into the news? So, because I think one of the craziest cards I've seen previewed in a while got previewed this week, and I haven't really checked the Discord discourse or the Twitter discourse as to people how people are reacting to this card. So I'd love to hear in the comments like kind of what people are thinking about this card. But there has been a cycle revealed, which is hybrid. Effectively, as you know, everyone loves to say 2 card 7s, Brendan, a 3 cost 7 attack at red, but it's a cycle of Guardian/Warrior attack actions. There's one as a Guardian/Warrior attack action, there's a Brute/Warrior attack action, and then there's also a Brute/Guardian. So there's one for each wedge of the 3 classes represented in heavy hitters. So that's Wage Might, Wage Agility, and Wage Vigor, and each of these, a 3 cost attack at red for 7, defense for 2. I believe this is also a cycle, and when it attacks, you can wager. Obviously, for Might, it's a Might token, Agility token, Vigor, a Vigor token. I believe at this point, we still haven't seen the Might token, right? We've seen Agility and Gold. Obviously, we know what Gold does. We know Agility is this new kind of Quicken-esque token, but we're still yet to see what the Might token is. But, Brendan, the card that was most interested to see. Sorry, we've seen, so there's Vigor tokens are the one we've seen. So
we've seen Vigor as well. So I don't know. I mean, I Googled it and it came up, and Vigor token is at the start of your turn, destroy this, then gain a resource, which is like pretty nuts.
That's right. So have we seen the Might token? Because it's not, I'm looking at the spoiler page and I can't see the
let me just
the Vigor token. Maybe we have seen the Might token.
Probably have. We have. So Might actually No, this is current. Oh, there it is. There's the might token. It's just, of course, it's absolutely microscopic. So give me a sec here as I try to zoom into it. Maybe
It's the deal damage. It's the attack plus attack one, right?
Yeah, it looks like it maybe came out in the Professor box, actually. So it says at the start of your turn, destroy this, and the next attack this turn gains +1.
Yeah. So they're all start of turn triggers. Might for resource, agility for go again, and might for plus damage, agility for go again, and vigor for the resource.
I mean, vigor seems crazy. I'm assuming it'll be a bit harder to make than the others, but one resource is definitely way better than one attack.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember seeing this as well, because everyone was talking about like kind of Blossom of Spring. Like this is kind of what this is, right? Creates your Blossom of Spring effectively that pops at the start of your turn. So, yeah, card's good. But Wage Gold is the one I'm interested in, which is a rare. So the rest is a common cycle, but Wage Gold is a rare cycle. And there's a new keyword. So it's still a 3 cost red, attacks for 7, defense for 2, or the one we've seen so far. And it has wager a gold token with your opponent, but it has this new keyword, Universal. While in any zone, this is the same class as your hero. Brennan, you finally got a wizard attack action.
Yeah, it's probably still bad in Kano. Yeah, for anybody that goes to the place that I kind of went to for a sec before I immediately checked myself, no, you can't Kano this and banish it or anything like that. It has to be a non-attack action. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think about these 2-for-7s? Because 2 cards 7 that blocks for 2 is actually not that impressive. I mean, it's fine, but the additional text on the cards is that you can take a risk, you can wager, and you can probably get that 2 for 8-ish value, right?
Yeah. So I think in limited, I love these, right? They're an early pick that probably keeps you open to 2 classes. So I think this is the kind of card I'm looking for in a set like this. I think that's the kind of what we need for the draft format in particular, is these kind of strong cards that keep you open. Think of Outsiders with the kind of hybrid cards, but now we've got a hybrid card in each wedge. So as opposed to just 2 of the 3 wedges, which I think is really interesting. In terms of Wage Gold, I mean, a card that is, like on the surface of it, yeah, it's just a 2-card 7 and it does defend for 2. But I mean, the fact that this is open to every class and is a class card is really interesting, because people were, jamming poppers in the deck just to have poppers, and some of those have anti-synergy. They don't work quite the way that people want them to. I think we're at the point now where there's enough of those kind of abilities that this probably isn't as powerful as it looks when I first saw it. But I think the flexibility of this for constructed is really interesting. But in limited, this card is also, very, very good, because it's all 3 classes. So it does keep you completely open, potentially, in a class card. So you can trigger all your class-specific pieces to it. But also at the same time, you can play it in any of them. So I think Wage Gold is very, very interesting for both limited and constructed. So
my favorite card, Spoiled, is actually a token. It's created by another card. It's called Centauri Sellsword, and I did not see this coming. So Kasai can basically make allies. They're warrior tokens, like little warrior guys that fight for you. They have 3 attack, 2 defense, and say once per turn action, attack. It costs 1 resource, but they have go again. It says Centauri Sellsword can only attack if you've attacked with a weapon this turn. So one of the cards that creates this is called Raise an Army, which is a warrior non-attack action. Kasai specialization. It pitches for yellow, costs 0, blocks for 3, and says, as an additional cost to play this, destroy X gold you control, create X Centauri Sellsword tokens, go again. And this is obviously a majestic. This is just absolutely not where I saw Warrior going whatsoever. Is like you're like raising this army, because this is this is something that's been definitely reserved for illusionists in the past, but the idea of like bringing up all these sellswords to fight for you as Kasai because they're mercenaries and you deal with gold is like quite the flavor win, in my opinion. I really don't like at this stage, this many years into Flesh and Blood, this idea of like flavor and flavor wins, like it is very much aloof to me because I just don't see the game that way anymore. But this jumps out to me and I'm like, wow, it's actually pretty sweet.
I think it's really interesting for limited in particular. The way you can make gold with Kasai is the hero ability, which is the Spanish 2 red, 2 yellow. Next time a weapon hits this turn, you create a gold token. Plus, you've obviously got gold synergies. I mean, we just saw wage gold, right? There's other cards that allow you to wage for gold and to collect gold. So it's going to be interesting to see if this Centauri Sellsword token is created by anything other than Raise an Army. I mean, it seems really powerful, right? So if it's anything other than this majestic, that's interesting for limited in terms of what that does. And then in terms of constructed, obviously you have the Kasai of the Golden Sand ability, and Kasai, Young Kasai ability, which are the same. But in terms of, kind of how you actually generate enough gold, potentially pull off these big raise army turns. That's gonna be interesting to see. I think. I don't know quite what that will look like, but yeah, interesting spoilers so far. Interesting preview season. Why don't we just? I guess on the back of that, Brennan, we have a preview dropping on December 29th.
Yeah. We're back in Legend Story's favor. We're revealing a hero.
There you go.
Wink on that. There's definitely. I don't even know how to say it. I can't spoil anything, but
but we have a hero to reveal.
Yeah,
so.
There's tongue in cheek with we have a hero to reveal.
December 29th. You can check it out. I'm be on Twitter. We'll have something to share directly from LSS Plus. So look out for that. That'll be. I mean, what are we now? So it'll be the week. What was the 29th? That is a Monday? What day is that?
So I got this thing in the bottom right of my computer. I can click it. It's a Friday.
Yeah.
Might be a Saturday. It's a Friday here.
You're right.
Okay.
It is. So look out for that. Why don't we pop into the news? And I want to start with ban and the no longer suspended but newly restricted announcement. I think the first big thing, right, is that there is no more suspended lists. So LSS have announced that they're going to do away with the suspended list and use just the ban list. So they've said, they use the suspended list, especially in the early sort of portion of this new ban and suspended. So it's been about, nearly 2 years of ban and suspended, at least a year and a half. And one of the key reasons they point to was, suspending until things were living legend was a big piece of what they were using. They're now happy to make these bans and give a lot more depth to their bannings in terms of their reasoning, which I think they have, right, Brendan? I think over the past couple of ban and suspended announcements, these articles have been a lot longer and they've been a lot clearer about the reasons for or why they haven't banned certain cards or suspended certain cards. So a move to no longer a suspended list. I don't know, any thoughts on kind of just using that ban list and LSS's kind of clarity on what the ban list is?
I'm just trying to remember if we started out initially with just a ban list and then they expanded that to a ban and suspended list because they needed more nuance, and now we're going back. Mm-hmm. I just remember when they came out with the idea of suspended, I thought it was a good idea because the ban system back then didn't feel encompassing enough. Felt a bit too agnostic, but I don't know. I don't really have too many thoughts when it comes to bans, like the ban is suspended and the future design of the game and how it's all going to work with the increased rotation in Living Legend. I kind of just have to trust them and give my opinion as it plays out. But ultimately, I think that if they're making this decision, they're doing it with confidence. So I'll back them on it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just these in-depth sort of reasons. Like they've gone into more design pieces, testing pieces, whereas in terms of their ban and suspended reasonings, whereas previously, you get this ban and suspended. I think the reason they brought the suspended list is because, some of these articles were like half a page. They're like, this is banned, this is suspended, see you in a month.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like they're giving the kind of design background to it. I think this is Brian Gottlieb influence. Like they're giving a lot more, they're diving into a lot more detail around their decisions.
Yeah, I really miss the days when they used to just straight up lie to us, like telling us that Starvo lost to testing when Plunder Run was legal, which is not true, by the way.
Before Briar was eroded. All right, let's move on within this because so Class Constructed, there's no changes. I think that was pretty obvious, right? Since Living Legend for Icelander, we've seen a pretty wide array of heroes do well at the Battle Hardens so far, and it's really young in the season, and also it's it's kind of off season, right? Like there is a few Battle Hardens tracking, but for the most part, we're kind of into what is mostly a fab off season in terms of there's only tier 2 events running at the moment. So the first tier 3 event won't be until Queenstown in January, so kind of makes sense, and also that's of course limited with heavy hitters. Blitz, Aether Wildfire moves from banned to legal. There you go, Brennan. Stir the Aether Winds moves from banned to legal. And this is the one I want to get your commentary on. Centauri Saber will become the signature weapon of Kasai and will be legal from the release of Heavy Hitters on February 2nd, 2024. So we'll move off of the Living Legend list where it was the signature weapon for Kasai to now being the signature weapon for Kasai.
It's almost like the signature weapon system doesn't make any fucking sense because it's random. I don't mean to be toxic there, but the idea, this whole system, I don't think it's going to last. I think they're going to get rid of it eventually because you're just hitting collateral damage on weapons that aren't the actual problems when we're rotating a hero that is the actual problem. And we're seeing the ramifications of doing such a thing right now. But it's funny to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on I think it was a pod like 2 weeks ago. I kind of like the system to a degree in terms that I do want weapons to leave. I think that's an interesting piece of what it opens up to design and deck building and things like that. But I do agree. This when I saw this, I just kind of like thought of you immediately and chuckled and was like, "Oh, Brendan will have a field day with this one," based on his comments a couple of weeks ago. But in terms of the Blitz's ban and restricted announcement, they also say that they're going to keep Snapback on the ban list for fears of just Emperor Drakive and how the Emperor kind of interacts with a pretty powerful card there, and just given how powerful, honestly, Emperor is in Blitz right now. So I think giving another card there kind of doesn't make sense. So, I kind of agree with that. Living Legend. All right, here we go. Restricted list is in full swing. We have a total of 7 cards being restricted in the Living Legend format. So we talked last week about Living Legend and kind of changes needed to potentially curb Starvo. So Channel Lake Frigid, Crippling Crush, Awakening, Hypothermia, Oakenold. Sorry, let's take a pause. It's quite a long list. Starstruck, Warmonger's Diplomacy. A whopping 7 cards are all on the restricted list. This new restricted list means you can play 1 copy of each of these cards in your deck. That is what the restricted list means. That is 7 cards restricted. That is effectively 21 cards taken from probably Starvo to a degree. But my question is, okay, first of all, is this enough? And secondly, is this the right approach given that you're taking Channel Lake Frigid also from Icelander and Lexi potentially, Crippling Crush from Bravo Showstopper, Hypothermia from Icelander, which might not be a bad thing, honestly, that card's so toxic. Or you're at least restricting it, right? Oakenold taken from Ultim, Channel Lake Frigid also taken from Ultim, Starstruck taken from Bravo Star of the Show, and Warmonger's Diplomacy, which may be just the right call because it might be too powerful against the Rude Blades of the format. But I don't know, it's a lot of cards here to hit Starvo, and there is splash impact here, which I think is worth talking about.
I kind of feel like Warmonger's Diplomacy, I don't know if I've come to a conclusion whether I think that card is just a overall mistake, but it's like just a very unfun card, especially when it can be easily splashed in as a blue, and it just, turns off significant portion of decks that you might face. That's the one I'm actually, some of these are expected, like Awakening, but Warmonger's Diplomacy, I'm really happy to see that was restricted. CLF is a very interesting decision considering that Phi exists, and the more that you neuter Starvo, the more that the Phi basically Kano deck that starts in play, stays in play, becomes more playable, and that deck is really toxic. So overall, yeah, I like it. I think that they're definitely knocking Starvo down a peg, and I think it will still be a good deck, but changes were needed. We had 8 of the top 8 consistently. This will leave a lot of room for other decks to come back into the format. CLF is the weirdest one for me, though.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with the restrictions is just that kind of second piece, which is, first of all, I think, this will definitely impact Starvo, 100%. You're losing somewhere in the vicinity of like 15 to 21 cards potentially from the deck, so you have to re-look at how you build that deck, and that's happened to Starvo a few times in different formats. But then I think you look at the cards that get taken from something, like it feels like it's like, okay, we've already cut away a big chunk of Icelander and Ultim before we even get jiving with the format. Yeah. And look, honestly, for the health of the format, I actually think that's probably a good thing, to be honest. I think, that leaves exploration open for other heroes that haven't seen some prominence of play for a very long time. But I think when the purpose of the format is like Living Legend and to allow people to play all their heroes again, I think that's, you're basically starting with kind of a handicap on some of these heroes, and that's I don't know. It feels a bit weird to me in a Living Legend format, but we'll see. I actually think it's interesting for the game. I'm excited by this, but I'm just not sure it kind of fits the philosophy of what I thought Living Legend format would be in terms of some of the splash damage here that's happening with the restrictions. I
think I have a hot, like not so hot take, and people can tell me if it's dog water, but I think that restricting CLF makes Icelander immediately like basically unplayable in Living Legend format, because how is it going to deal with like any aggro deck? It already exists on a fine margin in Classic Constructed with having 3 of these cards in the deck, and your matches are predicated off of you drawing this card earlier rather than later, also drawing it in multiples, and having a single one in a format where the aggro decks are actually on steroids. Like, I just don't think that Icelander is going to be remotely playable in this format. I could be wrong, but CLF is just the weirdest hit to me. I understand that it's definitely a restricting card, but I think it's like a very fair restricting card. This Phi deck literally wins on turn 0 or turn 1 with equipment that just starts on board.
I think what this does is a deck like Icelander now has to lean into the power turns a lot more, so the combo turns into the Amulet of Ice turns. And I think Icelander still has a place in this format, but it's going to be pretty susceptible to these aggro decks with one copy of Hypothermia and one copy of Channeling Frigid. Honestly, Hypothermia can go take a walk. Honestly, I hate that card so much. I think that card is pretty toxic, but
yeah.
Anyway,
Well, I also think Awakening should have just been straight up banned because the card is still going to be freaking annoying to play against. Like, even if it's a one of, I mean, the card's design is just bad in my opinion. I don't think that it should exist in Flesh and Blood, but it's fine. I'll survive if there's one allowed. Whatever.
My kind of other takeaway from the use of the restricted format, like you say, as opposed to just banning these cards, is like they're restricted so many cards, and using a restricted system, it's like what this feels like reading between the lines to me is, let's increase the variance but don't diminish the power too much. You know what I mean? Like kind of some of these fundamentals that we've talked about.
Flesh and Blood.
Shift and Flesh. Yeah, exactly. So.
that just basically is Flesh and Blood.
Really doubling down. Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, this next set, theoretically, because it is so combat based and it's back to the roots. I don't remember who I heard that quote from, but it was somebody that works at that company. It should have less variance in it, I guess, from that description, but we'll see if they extend some of these design concepts that we've seen in these previous two sets to this set. Then I think it's very clear that their direction forward is to cut out the floor and increase, leave the ceiling there.
Yep, just make it more variable. Lastly, Commoner, Amulet of Ice, and Stubby Hammer is banned. Look, personally, I haven't played much Commoner, and I know it's a format that LSS kind of chicken on irregularly, but from what I've heard, those two bans make sense. And lastly, next ban is restricted announcement. It's going to be tough getting my head around saying ban and restricted every time as opposed to ban and suspended, because it took me about this long to stop saying ban and restricted as a Magic player previously. Will be Monday, March 25th, but remember there is a Living Legend check every week, so that is after the PT. The next ban and restricted announcements after the PT. So unless there's an emergency kind of announcement, whatever happens to the heavy hitters heading towards PT LA, like that is the format we'll have outside of Living Legend that could occur from. And honestly, there's not really many heroes that are close to Living Legend that could Living Legend before PT LA. So PT LA kind of looks like we'll get heavy hitters and then get into your testing, and that's the format you'll be playing. So that personally, from a personal standpoint, I'm good with. So we'll see how that kind of plays out.
Yes. I mean, we've spoken about it before on the pod. This whenever Pro Tours or World Championships are set up in a way to where there can be a significant change in the metagame due to a rotation, a ban, or something 1 or 2 weeks before, I think it's less interesting, actually. It's maybe more interesting to spectate, but it's less interesting to prepare for.
I mean, I think again, depends on like time available, right? Like for me, it's stressful and I don't have the time to do that. So I'm thankful for a bit more of a solved format heading to it. Well, no, I don't like it to being solved. I like that I know kind of where I stand. But if there's not room for innovation, that kind of does bum me out a little bit. But yeah, we'll see. Premier Play announcement for early 2024. So there's been a lot of things. I mean, this is off season, but so many announcements coming from LSS in the last week or so. Top line, not 1, but 2 Pro Tours, 18 callings, 50 Battle Hardens, which we knew a lot about already, but the 18 callings is now confirmed. Kicks off at the start of the year with Jan 17th, Queenstown. It's the premiere of the heavy hitters on the Friday and the calling on Saturday, Sunday. And then, of course, Brennan, the once-in-a-lifetime celebration featuring all of your favorite fab faces, Brennan. That's all of them will be there, obviously.
Yep.
Anyway,
let's talk about 1 versus 2 Pro Tours. Okay. Which you've already known about. That was an interesting change in the first place. We had a very back-to-back-to-back competitive season in, 2021 or 2022? 2022, surely, right? That was when we were in
2022.
Yeah, very back-to-back-to-back.
First year Pro Tours.
And there were some people, definitely a vocal minority, that complained about that state of organized play, that it was too much, etc. And I don't know if the change was as a result to those complaints, but then we changed the system with 1 Pro Tour and 1 World Championship, and it's definitely worse. it's way better to have two Pro Tours and 1 Worlds and just more big events. I think that original argument stemmed from this idea that you literally have to go to both. Like, you don't. If you can't make both of them, if you can only make 1, or you can only make 1 Pro Tour and the World Championship, that's fine. You're not obligated to go to these. And I think that when we, as a response to that, received less top-end organized play, that was not good. And I'm happy they responded and brought it back, because you want more reasons to travel. Like, it's cool to go to LA and then to go to Amsterdam and then to go to Japan for the next World Championship. Like, I would love to do that. So I'm happy to see it. And
I thought you were going to tell anyone that.
The big news here, by the way, is not the 2 Pro Tours; it's the 18 callings. That's what Legend Story is actually really proud of, is these 18 callings.
And the 50 Battle Hardens.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, these days it feels like there's already 50 Battle Hardens going on, because there's so many grassroots tournaments going on, and they're not all Battle Hardens, but we have these like.
But there's some PTI events given. Yeah, there's some PTI events where PTI is given out. Yeah. So honestly, like between Battle Hardens and PTI events, there's like currently like well over 100 PTIs given out. So, it's interesting. I think for me, I agree with you. Like, we can talk about this later on, probably won't be at Amsterdam. I like the problem. Okay, so the problem I think that they had originally with dropping to 1 PT, or the reason they needed to do it, was they just hadn't figured out the schedule. Like, the scheduling was so tight. Oh, yeah. Now they've like announced ahead of time the schedule all the way to PT2, which, I mean, honestly, like, I didn't think that was actually going to happen. I was like, they need to do this. Didn't happen last year. Didn't think it was going to happen again this year. They've gotten it sorted out. They're ahead of the curve, they're on the curve now. They were behind the curve in terms of announcement of events. And I think the scheduling makes a lot more sense now. So I think people kind of talked about burnout with 2 ProQuest seasons in particular last season, but I think the game is now maturing. People understand what they want to play, and people are thinking it from like, what do I want to play, as opposed to what do I need to play. And I think that was kind of a interesting way to look at it anyway, but that's how people looked at it.
Burnout is like such I don't know, the argument of burnout back in that old competitive season, in my opinion, was like so narcissistic, because it wasn't actually like, they weren't referring to burnout where like, I had to grind this RTN circuit in order to make it to the Pro Tour. They're like, I'm spoiled for choice on Pro Tours. I have burnout. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, you can just literally not go to one. And that's where we've arrived now. In modern Flesh and Blood, we have multiple Pro Tours and a World Championship. And like Hayden said, he's probably not going to Amsterdam. Like, if you can't make one, it's really not the end of the world.
So callings in Hartford, Liverpool, Warsaw, Minneapolis alongside US Nats are confirmed already for the first half of the year. There is a Southeast Asian calling April 5th. We don't know where yet, but we know there is a Southeast Asian calling there. There is the other announcement is a longer national season, road to national season, ProQuest season. So listening to what everyone's kind of said around that kind of condensed season and what that meant for players. So going back from 3 weeks back to 4 weeks, which is where we were the year before, and we can share the season dates. So Road to Nationals runs from Feb 17th to March 10th. So, very soon, basically, kind of that's going to be the first kickoff to the season, apart from a couple of callings, is this Road to National season. ProQuest Season 5, which will be qualifying for PT Amsterdam, will be April 13th to May 4th. Is that right? That sounds right. Yes. United States Nationals and calling Minneapolis is June 14th to 16th. National Champions for the rest of the world is after this, is after the calling, which I think makes sense because a lot of people last year wanted to play callings but also want to play their nationals. That's June 21st to July 7th. And then ProQuest Season 6 will be October 5th to 27th, which will queue you for PT1 2025. So it's good that we have these dates out. There is also some changes to kind of the event structure, and LSS have made it really clear that what the event structures will be for the year in terms of the percentages of calling main events. So they've said that 50% to 60% of the callings will be classic constructed, 30 to 35% will be limited. I want to ask you a question about this, Brendan. There's a big increase in limited, sealed deck, and booster draft calling main events. And then 10 to 15% will be other events such as Living Legend. So I think we're definitely seeing a Living Legend calling coming up. Blitz and team. So I'm hoping, I would say we probably get one of each of those because we're 18 callings, they're saying 10 to 15%. I'm thinking we probably get one blitz, one team, one Living Legend calling, or maybe potentially just two, a Living Legend and a team blitz, for instance. But yeah, your thoughts on an increase in limited calling main events?
I think that's where it should be. I think that's where limited should be. It should be in callings. Like, I mean, but
you did say on the pod last week, you said that they were going to see less limited because you're like,
no, they're going to see less sealed deck. They're only going to do sealed deck at a tournament that accompanies another big tournament. So at something like a Pro Tour at a Nationals. That's what I heard. And I'm probably not even supposed to say that, but that's what it is. And that's because of the approachability. I mean, I've spoken ad nauseum that I don't like split format at tier 4 events, but I'm okay if it was, it's not that I don't like limited, I just don't like split format. With there being more limited callings, I'm totally cool with that. I like the idea of if there's a calling local to me and it is limited, I can just walk up and play. Like, even for someone like me that has access to cards, is entrenched in the game, that's still somewhat of an attractive thing to me. It just makes it easier to do, easier to go to. And I mean, Flesh and Blood is a game that's very proud of its limited, for better or for worse. So they should, they should put their money where their mouth is, and they should make these tournaments limited. So I'm all for it.
Your face was so funny then. For those on audio, I saw Brendan pause about what to say next. Look, I mean, I would love more draft callings. Sealed, look, unless there's a shift in the design and the seal format, that I'm always hopeful. You know, I see this tri-wedge format coming up in terms of what we've got with the 3 classes, and I'm excited for that in terms of how that might work. Excited to see all the heroes that we'll be playing with in that format, and maybe sealed is going to be better. I'll always be hopeful, but if not, then I think these need to be drafted, as Brendan says. But yeah, I'm super excited for teams calling. I'm super excited for Living Legend. I'm worried that I'm probably going to get to play none of those, because I think those will probably be in larger markets like North America or Europe. And honestly, I think the amount of callings I play in North America and Europe this year will be 0, unless it's on day 2 of a PT and I scrub out again, which, you know, come on, Brendan, I'm going to make sure I'm prepped to not scrub out of another tier 4 event. I've done it once, I'm not doing it again. All right. And then lastly, changes to qualification. So PT Amsterdam is definitely going to be a lot harder to qualify for than previous PTs. There is no more XP qualification for PTs moving forward. They're removing that. If you want to go and check out the full article on fabtcg.com, I'd recommend it, but they talk about basically the reason for this, and it was always coming. We've talked about this a lot. You know, XP was to a gap stop for in terms of until ELO was a bit more developed. I know this is going to hurt for some other countries, potentially smaller countries, smaller markets, but go and check out the article. And then there will now be an ELO combined board, so combining effectively what we used to have before they split it out, Brendan, but limited and constructed a overall aggregate leaderboard for ELO top 75, which I think is great. That's really cool. I think we should have all 3 of those, to be honest. But that aggregate board will be used for qualifications for PT Amsterdam top 75, and then I guess they'll review changes from there.
Yep, removing XP. I don't know. I know that it's weird, because I'm sure. What's the validity to the argument that, like, it should be there because it incentivizes people to play in their local game stores and people should be able to qualify this way, etc. I mean, I feel like it's hard for me to find the words, because I feel like I'm going to offend the people that liked qualifying via XP. I never liked that system, even from the beginning. I was like, why do we have an ELO system and we're still qualifying based off of XP? XP is not 100% participation, but it kind of is. And it felt like it lingered for a bit. I don't necessarily disagree that the XP system incentivized higher level players, or players that were trying to qualify these events, to play more in the local game stores than they would have. And I would not be surprised to see some players that are maybe grinding that local scene in order to get the free roll on the XP invite stop doing so, which is probably not a good thing. But ultimately, to qualify for the highest level of professional Flesh and Blood play, qualifying via XP did not feel right when people were also qualifying. Like, the other way to qualify was ELO. So it was like, it felt like, I don't know, it feels like ELO is more representative of skill. And this is coming from a person that is not qualifying off ELO than XP, and they were weighted similarly. Nevertheless, you can still buy PTIs. So what am I going to say?
Yep. Exactly. Don't have too much more to say. I think, give me my voice a bit of a break, Brendan. Why don't we go into the Command Cookout? We're back to another YouTube section. Unless you want to say something first.
It will raise the price of PTIs, by the way.
Yes, it will. It will.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
You mean of gifting?
Yes,
PTIs?
of the generous gifts. They might require more favors now.
Yes. Let's move into the Commander Cookout. We're back on another YouTube section. Commander Cookout. Brendan, give me a bit of a break. My voice is struggling. I'm a little bit sick, so take it away.
All right. The first one here is from Blasphemeth. They say, thanks for answering my question. Really wanted to bring discussion up about it, since the LL format seems stale without something to adjust to it. Also, OTK Viserai matchup can be solved by Guardian with a little card called Smack of Reality. And I'm assuming Smack of Reality is this UPF card that was printed in the Professor box that just destroys all the auras. I have not seen the card. I've never read the card, but I've heard rumblings about it. I actually never even heard the name. I just heard, hey, there's this new card that just destroys all the auras.
I forgot about that card. Definitely forgot about a lot of cards from around the table, but that's a good point. I actually completely forgot about that card.
Let me read that card out because I've actually never read this. I just heard about this card. Okay, here we go. Smack of Reality. It's a Guardian attack action. It's red. It costs 5. It attacks for 9 and it blocks for 3. And it says Tower. If this has 13 or more power, it gets when this hits a hero, destroy all aura tokens they control.
Yeah, but yeah, the fact this isn't Crush and this is just like if it has 13 or more, destroy all is pretty gross. But I do think you can block this card out. You do play a lot of defense reactions in that deck, so I don't think it's like a silver bullet that kills that deck, but it is very good against the aura OTK strategy. So.
All right. Next one here is from Ryan. They say, I've been wondering if they'll try restriction instead of banning in LL. It allows them to still say all cards are legal, maybe hit Awakening plus something else for Startle. So a bit of premonition here. That's exactly what they did.
But I love the maybe hit Awakening plus something else. How about 6 more cards, Ryan? How about 6 more cards?
Yeah. And yeah, I'd love to hear people's thoughts on them hitting CLF as well, because that seems like that's an interesting one to hit as Phi looms in that format. All right. Solmanite. I should have worded my question better. I do actually believe Blitz is a legit Fab experience. I was more quoting rhetoric I'd seen online. So this is in regards to a statement last week that was asking if Blitz was a legitimate Flesh and Blood format. And yeah, I mean, both of us pretty much said yes in regards to that it is a legitimate Flesh and Blood format and it's a legit Fab experience. Yeah. I had somebody ask me Sunday, so a couple days ago, they're like, I'm looking about playing Flesh and Blood. What introductory product should I buy? I was like, I actually said it, but I was like, but you should probably buy Blitz decks and play those against each other because that is your best introduction to Flesh and Blood. And it was funny, though, being this entrenched in the game and someone asking me what they should buy for an introductory product to play with their girlfriend. I was like, I don't know, like maybe the UPF thing? I was like, what? Yeah,
maybe around the table. That's been my answer as well, dude. It's a tough one. And it shouldn't be tough. That shouldn't be a tough
He's
question.
like, I heard they had this like dual deck thing. I was like, nope, not that. Don't buy that. All right, next.
That's a great, also, the rhetoric, I think I know what Solmanite's referring to, and honestly, that rhetoric is just kind of stupid. So,
yeah. All right, here, Way of Hakodesh. Totally agree with the Brood analysis. Intimidate is such a toxic mechanic. Oh man, what if they brought it back? A truly negative play experience. I hope they make more mechanics for here and eventually phase it out. Well. That is pretty funny. That's a funny question.
It'd be interesting to see, I think, in terms of Intimidate. Like I agree Intimidate is a bit of a toxic mechanic, but when we were talking last week, someone asked what we wanted to see from heavy hitters. I said I want to see different takes on Brute. And I don't know what that is yet.
Different takes on Brute.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Anyway,
there's a lot of inside jokes going on here. And we apologize for them because, yeah. Anyway. Different takes on Brute. All right. Ronan3394. I forever maintain that Kano wins versus Icelander. We can fight on tempo, tempo axis, we can block well, and upon hitting stack, we win the game. Assuming good play, both heroes, Kano comes out on top unless Icelander draws very well.
You're just wrong, Ronan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, you are just playing against bad Icelanders. So I don't mean to offend the Icelanders you're playing against, but like it really is a bell curve. Like I promise, if you can beat, like I'll even throw some names out there. If you can beat Majin Bay, Peter, Michael Hamilton on Icelanders playing Kano, let me know. Let me know. I'll book you a spot immediately, and you'll take us to the promised land because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
To be fair, though, if you're able to beat 95% of the players on a certain deck,
yeah, but that's probably not the case either. That's the problem. It's like,
well, I do agree, but I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit. I also will point out that since the Amulet of Iceban, I do think that Kano does gain some percentage points, but I think it's gone from like a 98-2 matchup to like a 90-10 matchup. That was one of the most frustrating times I've had testing Flesh and Blood, was trying to find a way for
I also thought it was unlosable for Kano for quite a while because I was playing Kano on Talishar and I was absolutely shitting on every single Icelander I played against. It was not close at all. Like at all. I was comboing them every time. I could stack my deck if they wanted to go long. Like it was not close. Yeah. But once we started doing that with internal testing, it quickly switched. And there's a little card called Energy Potion, which they add in variable amounts of. And oh my God, it makes the matchup so bad. All right.
Energy Potion and Amulet Vice were the worst. I remember like messaging you guys. I think it was you, Sasha. Maybe it was when I think you were playing some games with Peter as well. And I'm just like, dude, me and Dan have played like close to 100 games this matchup, and we cannot beat. Like every time we adjust, we like work out the counter strategy as Icelander. Like we cannot beat it. And you're like, no. And then like 3 days later, you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, Icelander just wins. Also, like, it was a lot easier to beat Icelander when Icelander wasn't actually playing attack actions.
Oh yeah. I mean, if they're doing that, whatever.
But this is like back in the day, where it was like still, I don't even know if it's a good matchup. Okay.
I think it is if they're not. There was a couple of responses in the comment section on UPF being the issues with UPF being a lot around the kind of like attacking into multiple players, and like we talked about the asynchronous kind of play that's involved, but a lot of people came back on that and said the big issue is really around your resources, so you're 4 players, let's say, but you only have resources as if the game was 1v1. Like it basically just isn't designed for this, and that's a big problem with UPF in terms of the resources available to you on a turn-to-turn basis. Let's say you take your turn, the person to your left attacks you immediately, and then you're now susceptible to the person on your right attacking you on their turn, and that time you get no actions, you get no way to draw up cards, you get nothing to do. And because it's a hand-to-hand system, unlike Magic where you're continuing to accrue resources in your hand, it's a very different prospect for multiplayer, which, look, I completely agree with. That was one of my issues I had when I played UPF, so I thought it was just worth shouting out because multiple people kind of made that comment on last week's pod, Brendan. That's
pretty funny. So that's pretty funny, yeah. So you can just get like turbo attacked and just like, I don't know. We get questions about UPF all the time, and at one point I'm just gonna have to stop answering them because like I'm just not the person. I no interest in that format. I have an issue with the format or with UPF that is not an issue with Legend Story's design of the format. It's just I don't like sitting there waiting for my turn in asynchronous games that consist of 4 players, and I'm just not gonna play it unless hell would have to freeze over for me to sit through a UPF game. I'll say that.
All right, let's get Brendan to do that in LA. All right, let's get into the main topic of the pod. It's been 40 minutes. We're going to get flamed for taking 40 minutes to get to the main topic of the pod, Brendan. But guess what? It's the end of the year. I don't care. There was a lot to talk about. We had some great responses on the Command & Cookout YouTube comment section. There's been a lot of changes from LSS. We had preview cards to talk about. With all that said and done, let's take a look back at 2023. Let's dive in from organized play to events and fab, on and off the table, some of our highs, lows, learnings, and favorite moments. Let's start with organized play, Brendan. And I want to talk just briefly about the year that was to start with, just in case people kind of forgot. This has been a kind of crazy year for Flesh and Blood. Yes, we only have 1 PT, but there's been a lot of events. January 2023, so the start of this year, we kicked off with the ProQuest Season 3, qualifying people for Pro to Baltimore. See, I'm good at that. February, we saw a couple of callings, Auckland, Indianapolis, another win for Michael Hamilton, continuing his dominance. Auckland was won by Sam Sutherland on Dash. When nothing may happen much in March. April, we went into Skirmish Season 6, Pro Tour Baltimore, of course, before we got into May with the Road to National season, plus Calling Antwerp. Was that the one that was won by Pablo?
I have no idea.
Yes, it was. It was the one by Pablo. And, so there was a bit of a narrative, remember, after Pro Tour Baltimore, kind of, the Michael Fing, the Michael Hamilton, the Pablo Pinto kind of debate. As we moved on to the second half of the year, a lot more events. So we had Calling Singapore, of course, won by Nick Butcher. We had multiple more battle hardens. We had the Calling in Birmingham, where Pablo made another finals appearance, but I think Sam Braben won that one on Icelander. August, we had Skirmish Season 7, and the Skirmish season underway. More battle hardens, I think 4 battle hardens, plus we went into Calling Vegas, which was alongside US Nationals. Calling Vegas, won by Yuki Lee Bender, right? Let's not forget, I want to talk a little bit about Yuki as we get into kind of the year in review. National Championship season went underway. September, more battle hardens. October, yet a lot more battle hardens, including the foray into Tokyo for the Japan market, the Japanese market, and Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. Calling Taipei, won by our dear Azalea player, oh my gosh, Justin. Sorry, I was just blanking on Justin's name for a second. More battle hardens, and then November, of course, Calling Melbourne, and then the World Championship, Calling won by Ben Dodd, And that's kind of the year. A lot of Battle Hardens this year when I look back at ProQuest Season 4 as well, of course, qualifying for PTLA, but a lot of Battle Hardens happened this year, Brendan.
Mm-hmm. Who wins your player of the year?
Oh, that's a great question. You know what? It's actually a snap answer. It's actually a snap answer for me. It's Yuki. Yeah. Yuki's had an insane season. I didn't realize like how many callings Yuki is top. It's like something like 4 callings plus the win and a world's 3 callings, sorry, plus the win and a world's top 8. After like finishing top of Swiss, right? Like Yuki kind of just dominated Swiss at Worlds and ran into eventual winner Alex in the quarterfinals. So I don't know. I think it's Yuki for me, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty fair answer, to be honest. It's hard.
Like, I was looking back at the callings, calling like Yuki literally made 3 calling top 8s, including the Vegas win and a PT top 8. Like that's kind of insane. I mean, I think the other contenders would be Brody, Michael Feng, Sam Sutherland. I think would be the other contenders. Charles Dunn even.
Like, yeah.
Well, I don't know if that was a one-sided question to me, Brennan. Okay, all right, we'll leave it there. Let's talk a little bit about favorite event of 2023, personally, maybe, or just from you did a lot of casting this year. You were sat on the casting side almost exclusive this year. So I'll have a player's perspective. You can have a commentator's perspective, but favorite event of 2023?
My favorite event was Pro Tour Baltimore. I just feel like the energy was there. I really enjoyed casting a lot of those games. They were pretty grindy, to be honest. Like there was a lot of Oldhim, Dramai, and then there was, of course, everybody's favorite deck, Lexi. But still, I don't know. The venue was really cool. Baltimore. I wouldn't say Baltimore as a city was awesome, but it was better than I'm sure everybody thought it was going to be. And yeah, I just felt like the energy was really there at Baltimore. I really enjoyed it. The World Championships was awesome, but I was very sick, so that part sucked.
Yeah, I think 2023, obviously missing Baltimore kind of sucked for me. Like I would have loved to have been in Baltimore. And of course, this is personal, right? There's callings that we didn't attend in Europe, etc. Birmingham, for instance, was a massive calling. Would have loved to have been there. I think for me, my favorite event was Singapore, calling Singapore, and not just for like a personal result. Making top 8 was great, but I just the community in Singapore is honestly one of the best communities I've experienced when it comes to Flesh and Blood. They're so passionate. They love the game. They put on great events. This was kind of in the sunsetting era of Ultim as well. And yeah, I don't know, just overall love the event. I felt like I enjoyed my preparation for the event. I love the event itself. I loved spending time in Singapore, spending time with people from the Singaporean community, but also from around like SEA, doing a few things, dinners, etc. So yeah, mine would definitely be calling Singapore. Do you have a most memorable match of the year? As someone who's commentated a lot of games this year and some big games, do you have a memorable match that kind of comes to the forefront for you? And I can speak from like maybe a player standpoint as well.
Let me think. I feel like it was Michael Feng versus Yuha. I think they played, right?
The semi-final of PT Baltimore. And there was like a 2-hour game, man.
It was quite well navigated by Michael Feng.
Yep.
It was just really impressive with the way he, of course, it was an attrition-based matchup. He was on a more defensive Oldhim deck, which is funny because he totally flipped it up in the finals. But the way that he pitched specifically the defense reactions to line up against a Ghostly Touch was just like very, very, very well done. And yeah, I think it was my favorite match.
I think from so I have a personal and then from a Flesh and Blood player, like a spectator standpoint. I think from a spectator standpoint, it was just watching the Tom Dowling run at Melbourne. I was in the venue, so I got to watch some of his games like in person, standing next to the table. But watching his final on 5 phones while we were doing like a practice draft for Bright Lights over in the corner, just waiting to see if he could pull it out, was such a memorable match. And congrats again to Ben Dodd, but that game was so close. And the fairy tale of Dash.io winning that would have kind of been insane. So and then from a personal standpoint, I had my quarterfinals at Nationals this year. A 2-hour Dramai Mirror pre-tome, screw that card, was one of the best games I've played this year personally against Zach Gardner. And yeah, I love I feel like an old dude, back in my day before tome, Dromai was great. But honestly, that's how I feel. I enjoyed playing Dromo so much pre-tome. So, and that 2-hour mirror match, Didn't do me any favors in my semi-final, unfortunately, but was one of the best games I've played of Flesh and Blood this year, I think. So we talked quickly about players. I just kind of want to shout out a few other players that kind of left their mark this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what these players do in 2024. People like Brody Spurlock, Yuki Lee Bender, who's had an amazing season. Of course, your world champion, Alex from Greece, Michael Feng, Aaron Shantz had an amazing season as well. I was looking back at some of the calling top 8s, also topped multiple calling top 8s plus Pro Tour top 8, Worlds top 8. Shing, who made the finals at Worlds. Sam Sutherland, who won a calling, won a Nationals, topped another calling as well. Just insane. Plus multiple like cash finishes at Worlds, at PT, etc. Michael Hamilton, of course, had an amazing start to the year. Interested to see what he'll come back with next year. Lucas Oswald, another young gun alongside Brody, who's had top multiple callings, won Battle Hardened at Worlds as well. Michael Jaska, same thing out of Canada. And Charles Dunn, who won US Nationals plus topped a couple of callings as well. So I don't know. I have a question for you though, which is how do more non-North American players break into this group with the current kind of event skew we have?
I don't know. That's a funny one. I would say win more events, but they do actually have less events. I don't know. I think there's a fair NA skew to North American players winning events. Like that's a fair skew. Then there's also an unfair skew, which is, I don't know, a lot of content creators tend to be from North America, and they sort of weave the narrative on some of these players. But, I mean, one of the narratives I think that came out of this year was Hong Kong, like Shing and his team.
Yeah, Blue Pitch, Team Blue Pitch.
So,
yeah.
I mean, they were the best performing team at the World Championship by quite a margin.
Yeah, not even close.
Yeah.
2 in the top 8, 3 in the top 16, 4 in cash, right?
Yeah.
I think from memory.
They did pretty well.
Kind of insane. Yeah.
Ultimately, I don't know what the answer is, but I honestly think they're doing fine already.
Yeah. I tried to be pretty partial though. Like I went and looked at the results from the year back, and these are the players who had multiple callings, multiple wins, or both. And there is a couple like Florian Christian Lahon, who won the calling at Worlds. You know, also came second at the massive Battle Harden in the US earlier in the year as well. So there, not that these European players aren't performing. Pablo obviously had an amazing season as well. Makes finals at calling Birmingham and wins calling Antwerp. So it's not like the European contingent haven't had a good year as well. Just that there is a number of people, and because there was more callings again in the US this year, more opportunities to get multiple event tops or wins. So. Yeah, that's an interesting one. All right, let's talk about some favorites. What was your favorite deck to play this year?
Kano. I think that's unsurprising and unchanging. It just is. That just is the answer. Yeah, I mean, just thought it wasn't the most competitive deck for a lot of these metas, but it's still the most fun deck.
All right, I'm not going to bother asking you what to dive into it for the next meta then, because I feel like we've already had that conversation the other week. I think mine was Ultim, honestly, which that's crazy to say that my favorite deck to play this year was Ultim, but I got to play it for about 6 weeks in total, I think, over the end of the Road to National season, and then calling Singapore, and had so much fun playing Ultim and that new kind of style of what Ultim ended up being, which is a lot more aggressive, a lot more proactive, a lot more kind of like. You got through your stack a lot. Well, you didn't get through your stack, but you got through the games a lot faster, I think, in terms of what you were trying to set up in the in-game, especially in the mirror. I love playing the mirror. I would have loved to have saved Dromai, but honestly, Brendan, Tome of Imperial Flame can jump off a cliff.
Yeah, so there's a question here that says card that pissed you off the most. I'm assuming yours is Tome of Imperial
Flame. Tome of Imperial Flame.
Mine's Tome of Imperial. Mine's probably Tome as well, but it could also be Remembrance.
Yeah, Remembrance is... Yeah. Do you think... I mean, Pro Tour Baltimore would look a lot different without Remembrance.
Yep. Future Flesh and Blood will look a lot different without Remembrance, most likely. Like, it is a card.
Do you think they should just get rid of it? Do you think they should just get rid of it?
Maybe.
Or can they not because of just kind of the power level and the shifts of what it could do to some potential heroes?
I don't know. I think, honestly, like, the biggest issues with that card are just, like, how polarizing it can be on those attrition-based matchups. But, like, ultimately, the card in a vacuum is not crazy. It's just... It just feels a bit warping sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, at some point... it kind of feels like the only card that really matters in matchups, and
yes.
That's kind of boring.
Yep, I agree. A card shouldn't feel like that in Flesh and Blood. Like, it shouldn't be like, oh, this card's going to define this matchup, because
there's so many
at some point
like that,
it's but not. It's like Remembrance is always the same thing. Like, it's always the same game pattern for the decks that play it. Whereas, like, you could say, okay, Oakenol defines this in X deck, or Tome of Imperial Flame defines it in Dromai, for instance. But like the way that every time you play a Tome of Imperial Flame, it looks different. Do you mean the end result of the cards that get played on the table are different? Whereas Remembrance is like, for most decks that play Remembrance, it's for a specific.
Sometimes you have different targets, like sometimes you grab your 2 rakes and your one Azavali. Sometimes you grab your 2 Azavali's, your 1 rake. I mean, there's so many decisions being made.
Brilliant. I mean, sometimes you grab your Cadaverous Contrabands, but whatever. All right, what about cards you enjoyed the most in 2023?
Oh, God. I didn't even think about this one.
I can start. Mine's Vambrace. I really enjoyed playing Vambrace because it was such an important part of my favorite matchup of the year, which is the Ultimate Mirror. So, which is something that honestly I never thought I'd ever say. But yeah, the Ultimate Mirror, particularly in kind of the time just before Ultimate Living Legend, so really low ice, a lot more combat based. That deck was a lot of fun to play, as I said. And then the Ultimate matchup, Vambrace just had the most impact in that matchup, and just the way that Vambrace meant that you play the matchup was kind of really enjoyable to me. So I think my favorite card, weirdly, or the card I enjoyed the most, definitely my favorite card, but the card I enjoyed the most would be Vambrace, which is
I feel like I have to pick a new card.
All right.
I don't know. I think Twin Drive is pretty cool. Like just enabling the maximum velocity a bit more and adding. Yeah, just a little bit of gas out of the deck. I'm not sure if I enjoyed Dash as like a hero, but I do think that card was really cool, and I did not see it coming in terms of the design of like being able to double boost off of it. So I like it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Twin Drive and Vambrace of Determination, good cards. Where are we next? I just kind of briefly lost my. Oh yeah. What's your biggest level up as a player? I know you spent a lot of time on coverage this year, so feel free to throw this as a coverage piece, but maybe you've learned something from obviously your time testing and playing, but also kind of from what you've seen of other players, but kind of your biggest level up in 2023.
It's interesting. It's probably something in regards to testing and like being in a house like a week before and like how important that is and how much of a difference it can make. I also think that the more open testing is just optimal nowadays. But yeah, I think it's all in regards to testing. Just like the more disciplined approach, being able to get out there and actually get in person. Because I remember there was at one point in Barcelona where Sasha like kept weighing up these ideas that were kind of ridiculous, especially in regards to like Icelander and some of our deck's matchups into Icelander, and like wanted to test that. And I was just like, just wait. Like literally in 12 hours, we have Peter and Majin coming over. Whatever questions you have, just we'll test it against that, because there's no reason for me and you to try to reinvent the wheel here and not only become masters of this Icelander deck, but also tweak it in the correct way where it can play against this Dromai deck, and just like evaluate all these concepts. And then we have these guys come into the house in 12 hours and just shatter all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think this shows the importance of testing to tier 4 and tier 3 events into high level events. Is that mine is, in terms of something that we talked about on the pod, we talked about testing a couple of weeks ago, and I also talked about kind of locking into a deck early and locking into a powerful strategy. So surveying the meta, understanding at a deeper level kind of what is actually powerful versus what's not, locking in, and then just finding the best strategies and the best cards for the matchup and just understand it. And I, went away for that 4 Worlds and got severely punished for it. And it was a learning that we took away from Leo last year, and somehow I forgot about it within the space of 12 months. But I think when I look back at kind of my favorable results over the past 12 months, like it's because of doing that. So my plan for 2024 in particular is to stick true to that kind of mantra of locking into the deck a bit earlier, finding something powerful that I enjoy, that I think is, or attacks the meta in a very interesting way, and just learn the kind of heck out of it. So yeah. Testing, Brendan, preparation.
Yep.
What's the preparation prevents piss poor performance, the 4 Ps, right? So what's been your biggest level up as a content creator this year?
I mean, this is kind of a big one because I did a lot more content in 2023, like a shitload more. I definitely learned a lot. I honestly don't think I could distill it into a single question or a single answer. The one thing I will say is that, and I've said it before, especially when it comes to podcasting, a lot of it's about resilience and discipline. I mean, obviously there's some foundation of like, do people actually want to listen to you? etc. But once you get past that, like the the true like magic fairy dust for what creates success is actually just discipline and just sticking with it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Yeah. I think it's creating the content I want and I enjoy, rather than creating the content I think people want.
Did we do that shit in 2022? Yeah, I mean, definitely stopped.
I also, I also did it a little bit in the first half of 2023, I think, as well. Trying to force content a little bit, and it's just unnatural. And I think, it made me create pieces of content that I didn't particularly feel passionate about. And I think that's kind of something that I'm taking away into 2024 is like, I'm going to create the pieces of content I want to. I'm going to set time aside for those really interesting pieces to me and kind of not worry about the other stuff. So yeah, I think, and that's resulted in some of my favorite pieces of content, which I think we can kind of maybe move on to, which is like, what's your favorite piece of personal fab content in 2023, a piece of content that you made or favorite podcast?
Yeah.
Favorite podcast?
For me, it's the one we do with Brian. Yeah, it's like not really close, to be honest.
Will we delve into design and kind of the future of Flesh and Blood?
Yeah. Pledge Story got really lucky with hiring him. I'll say that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think for me, some of my favorite content was the gameplay that I did with Nick Butcher. We did a 2 gameplay series, one with Dynasty and then one with Dust to Dawn. So with the supplemental sets, and I really enjoyed creating those, I think. And I think we had some really interesting games and some really interesting decks. Particularly like in one of the games, Nick showcases a Dromai deck or a Dromai idea that we kind of saw more of as also that game's insane as we move through into kind of more modern Dromai takes. And then also, I think showing off kind of new cards, showing off Levier a little bit, showing that, at the time, Viscerai could still hang, although, no Rosetta Thorn. But yeah, and I think from a podcast standpoint, I think probably we did a lot of podcasts I really enjoyed this year, particularly around like kind of fundamentals. And we had some really cool interviews as well. But I think kind of my favorite personal podcast was the one we did on like navigating in games. I really enjoyed creating that. And I think that there's a lot of value in that podcast. So if you haven't checked that out, this episode 113, we're going back like 6 months. It's like middle of the year, but navigating in games is one of my favorite pods that we did.
Believe it or not, we did 51 podcasts so far this year. This is the 51st.
Wow. How does that work?
I know, it's crazy, right?
Carry the 1 minus the 2. Do you have any fab regrets in 2023? Any things that you wish you'd done? Or
pretty much all of casting. I mean, it was a cool experience, to be honest. Like, and it was good to take a break from the game. But I don't know. It's just like, I feel like if I was looking back in 5 years or in 10 years, and this isn't like I'm not like trying to blow this out of proportion for the meaningful, like how meaningful Flesh and Blood is, but it's just I think it's just way cooler to be a player and I don't know, the casting thing is like, it seemed attractive at first, but then once I got into it and once I did it, especially towards the end, it was like, yeah, this is definitely not for me, both for reasons that are personal to me, but also that are specific to casting. Like, I'm probably just not the ideal candidate for that. And there's just something to Flesh and Blood and what makes Flesh and Blood rewarding. And it really comes down to hanging out with your friends, preparing together, and then like, testing yourselves at this event. And casting is very antithetical to that. I don't know. Like, I'm happy I did it because it gives me a better frame of reference, but I do think that it was ultimately like kind of a waste, but not a waste in the sense that I was able to learn from it, but I wouldn't do it again. Fair.
I think just on the back of that, I feel like I barely saw youth events this year. That's another piece of it. It's like, I feel like I barely saw Brendan because...
Yeah, it's work like crazy hours.
That's insane. Yeah. And you're in a different sphere as well. So I have a statement I want to say, and you can just agree or disagree with the statement. You don't have to like comment on it if you don't want to. And then I have a question for you. So my statement is that we need higher level players in commentary to provide in-depth analysis and create some personal connection with the game, and also to deliver a great experience to viewers, because I think that's really important to developing viewership in Flesh and Blood and kind of this connection. My question is the current setup of how casters the remuneration for casters, but also the kind of like system for selecting and bringing on casters kind of feels a bit broken to me. So you can either agree or disagree with the kind of total statement, but my question is like, how do we kind of encourage more high-level players. Might not be the right fit for you, but to potentially move into the casting world and be the kind of people that we need for the future of coverage in this game.
So, I mean, it's a heavy question, but I can even say something that's probably more risque than that, which is that I think if someone is in the casting booth for Flesh and Blood and they don't understand the game at a deep level, it's not very useful. And there's a concept in casting that there is a person that does what they call play-by-play and the host role, and that's very important. But in my opinion, that person should also be intricately aware of the game and able to actually analyze it on a deep and professional level. I think that a lot of the mistakes that have happened when it comes to casting and the talent team in the past, and this is actually not in regards to World Championships, have been because that there's this preconceived idea that you can have someone who does play-by-play or who does this host role, and they have no responsibility to be very entrenched and knowledgeable about the game. And I think that it's ultimately like very bad. Like, I don't think that person, like this archetype of person, provides value, where it's actually the complete opposite. On the production side, the production side puts the most value on that person, and they put the least value on the person that, you know, is deeply aware of the game, is maybe has played the game professionally and knows what it's like to be at these tournaments. Like, I think that you just need to find someone, you know, these kinds of people that are the whole package, right? That are both presentable, can play the host role, but are also very invested in the game. And that's sort of like my biggest, my biggest thing when it comes to, and I've said that so many times on the back end as well. I do think it's going to be hard for them to motivate people to do that, because like casting is really, in Flesh and Blood, is compensated pretty poorly, to be honest. Like, it's very, very far below industry standard. And like, honestly, they made some changes in regards to the people that run that area of the division, and it's been overwhelmingly negative to work with some of those people because they've been a bit deceitful. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I've had my business experience, especially since they changed management at that, has been it's been so bad, to be honest. I don't like talking about it on the pod because ultimately the casting experience and all that, it's professional to do, but it's been very good. But all of the logistics stuffs, all of the negotiations, like it's all been it's made me never want to do it ever again, because it was just so not worth it. And there's people who have to do it to, you know, like, it really matters to them, like if the compensation is this or that, and it becomes very political, and it's just like, I don't know. I think we end up with a product that we're not actually looking for in the end, because a lot of the stuff is happening for the wrong reasons, and it's just too much of a headache. It was like, I might as well just fucking play, because especially for Arsenal Pass, it's like literally doing casting is bad for the channel. Like, I know that you know this. I know that I know this. Ultimately, for Arsenal Pass, our channel, our brand, we even like the team thing that we're doing now, like, me not playing is actively bad for the channel. So I'm taking an opportunity cost to do that. It's just, and then now as we've come to the state where it's more and more not worth it, it's just overwhelmingly the correct decision for me to play the game instead. And I will enjoy it more because my friends are also doing that. So yeah, it's a lot to answer, Hayden, but ultimately, yeah, to your question, I agree with you. I think I'll have a hard time finding those people and also keeping those people. But unfortunately, systematically, it doesn't seem to be what they're looking for in terms of like the people, and don't extrapolate this to, you know, attach what I'm saying to certain people or certain not. But I mean, systematically, I think that the production in general, casting in general, puts too much emphasis on this role of play-by-play or the host to the extent that they'll even bring people on who don't even know like what the cards do, and like I just don't think that's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I actually just want to, on a positive note, shout out Punkage Ethnic Smoke, who I think is kind of, in my eyes, is kind of the person that you're talking about. He's
actually winning tournaments.
What we need.
He actually wins. He's
tournaments. A very good player.
Yeah, he's articulate.
He understands the game.
Yeah.
Very articulate. He's very intelligent and understands, and his intelligence relates to the game, right? He understands the game at a deeper level. He thinks about the game on a very theory-based level. And so it can ask these important questions, but also answer these important questions, I think. And you have to be able to do both.
To ask a relevant important and thought-provoking question, in most scenarios, you have to already know some of the answer to it to even come up with the question. And I think that's one of the key things. Is like when I see Joe Schmo interview like X game designer, it's not very interesting. But then when you see someone who like is very, very much understands the game and digs into the questions, the real problems, like that's way more interesting. It's the same thing for casting. Like the play-by-play role cannot ask the correct questions to the analysis role if they don't understand what's going on. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
I think mine will pale in comparison when we talk about Fabregas, but just quickly, I think mine has been kind of not doing the thing I want to do in Flesh and Blood, and probably trying to appease kind of, you know, a vision or an idea of what I should do when it comes to playing or whatever. So I think, you know, in 2024, I'm just going to play how I want to play the game, go to the events I want to play, and just enjoy the game.
Yeah.
That's my plan.
I think you and I have done the same thing too, to an extent, but like, and like, this is even a conversation. It's not even like 100% for the pod, but I'll just say it on the pod anyways. Like at the end of the day, in Flesh and Blood, Hayden and I are very lucky, very fortunate. And like, we do have the opportunity to engage with the game on a very sustainable level, to go to events, to interact with people that listen to the podcast, and just like have these awesome experiences. And I think that like that needs to be our focus, rather than trying to push for, you know, whether it was me like wanting like, oh, I want to do casting and I want to achieve this, and like maybe I could keep casting and that would be like a thing I could do. It's like we already have like such an opportunity to engage with the game that's already on like, such a fun level, such a rewarding level. It's like I think we just do that. Like I don't know. Like it's clear what the optimal path is for me, I think, moving forward.
I have to ask this question because I think you have a bit of an amendment to make from last week's pod, but I asked you about your favorite bit of content you made personally. What about someone else's favorite bit of content, or favorite bit of content from someone else?
Oh yeah. So wait, what was the amendment? I forget. It was like,
so last week on the pod, you did say that you liked the Chain Living Legend video that was made by misattributed to excuse me, to Gorganian Tone, but it was actually Mike from Blockout Party that made that video.
Yeah, sorry, Mike. Sorry about that. I think I watched the videos pretty close in succession to each other, and that's why I maybe got that mixed up. But yeah, that was my favorite piece of content, was the history of Chain. I think that the history stuff, I just really enjoy that in card games in general. Like the re-sleevables. I don't know if you know that podcast. They came back, and now they're playing the decks from the Magic the Gathering 1994 championship. It's just like,
they're never fun though. That's the thing. We've tried
you
this.
Think
it's not
they'll be
actually
fun, that they're not fun. Yeah, because you have Library Exile of Alexandria on turn 1, and you're just drawing cards. But
that's game.
Yeah, but it's cool. It's really cool to go back, and I look forward to the day that potentially this podcast gets to go back and sort of rehash the history of the game as the meta's progressed.
Dude, we've been here a while. It'll be 3 years next year, so we've got some more.
I know, it's like already, is it too early to be like the history of Welcome to Wraith?
I mean, dude, a lot of people did not play Welcome to Wraith, so I think it's relevant. We can talk about that. Shout out to Blockout Party and to Gorganian Tome, both respectively, for the content they've created this year. I think my favorite bit of content is probably Fab as a fighting game, which Gorganian Tome did create. And then shout out to the Living Legend Journey of Chain from Mike from Blockout Party for doing that. So, all right, let's kind of just wrap this up. I had some other questions, but let's look forward to 2024. And I want to ask, kind of, what does you said you're returning to play in 2024. What does that kind of look like for you? My kind of one I had circled on the calendar for you probably would be Battle Hardened Dallas, which is the weekend before the PT, would be kind of your return to play, and then PTL LA. The weekend after.
Yeah, I mean, Battle Hardened Dallas is just so easy to make it to, but ultimately, the only things I really care about are the Pro Tours and the World Championships. I hope that we can get, people together for that, because I remember I was already talking to Sasha about LA, and he's like, "Oh, I think I have to fly in and fly out." I'm just like, "This is like the worst thing ever."
I'm doing the same as well.
Yeah, you guys just got to get there a week before, in my opinion, if you can swing it. And Sasha definitely can swing it, but apparently, like, the flight prices are crazy, because that's the most enjoyable time of Flesh and Blood. For me, is the testing in person, like the week before. The tournament is fun, but I mean, you do 90% of the work before the tournament, and that's what I enjoy.
It's so funny. I'm like, I think maybe this is, I don't know if it's an age thing or like just kind of my development, but I'm kind of moving away from that a little bit. Like I do, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy the grind, the pre-grind, but it's definitely, I've not found it as enjoyable as I used to, I think. So I'm kind of reevaluating what I want to do in that space in terms of how I want to travel to events. I think I'm starting to value a lot more just the total experience and being able to see things. I mean, to be fair, LA, there's nothing to see anyway, but sorry.
I live in LA. There's plenty to see in LA.
I've seen it though. I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it. But yeah, okay. So what about callings? What are you on the radar for callings this year? Are you're not going to play any callings?
I don't know about that. It's just like, I mean, if they're convenient, if I know other people that are going, like if I want to play at that time, but no, I'm not going to go out of my way. So there's a mentality that goes into that. Pro Tour LA is coming up. I really don't care if I'm currently in the mood for Flesh and Blood or currently not in the mood. I'm going to play for it. I'm going to prepare for it, and I'm committed to that. That's not the same for whatever calling in whatever region of the United States. So it's more of an on the fly thing. If I feel like it, if it's convenient, if it's the right time, I'll do it. But I'm not committing to any callings. I'm committing to the Pro Tours and the World Championships.
Oh man, I'd love to be able to just be like, maybe I won't go to that calling. That's a 2-hour or 3-hour flight from me. Like, I think anything within an 8-hour, like I'm like, I've got to be there. Not I've got to be there, but I want to be there. Like I want to be. I love callings. Honestly, I love playing callings.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, it's funny. Yeah, I enjoy casting callings, which is funny off the back of what I just talked about. But I mean, it's different in the calling scene because you have the Savage Feats production, like all that stuff. So those are much more enjoyable to cast. Yeah,
I mean, shout out to those guys. Ethan and the team have done a great job. So what a year for those guys as well. So shout out. How are you planning to qualify? What's your kind of road to qualification look like?
PTIs and use my PTIs that are banked up.
Yeah. How many PTIs are you sitting on?
2 or 3. I think it's 2 now.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe I have to buy 1 this year.
I mean, depending how the year goes. So I'm qualified for LA via ProQuest. Nationals, I mean, I have to qualify for Nationals, road to Nationals, that's fine. But Worlds, I've really fallen sharply off the ELO leaderboards after a pretty poor second half of the year, Brendan. So yeah, I might be cashing in my first PTI for Worlds. We'll see.
I cashed in my first at Nationals and I regret it.
Yeah.
I would not do that again. I would not use a PTI for Nationals again.
I mean, especially I would if I was like super prepared and not playing Kano, but
Yeah, it was a limited format I didn't want to play and a constructed format I didn't really want to prepare for. So it was a mistake.
Final question, and this is something more I kind of want to talk about, but I mean, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this as well. I was like, content you want to make in 2024? Is there any particular content that you've liked making in 2023 or stuff that you've seen that you want to kind of replicate or do in 2024 outside of, obviously the podcast will be here. We're doing the podcast.
I don't know. That's tough. It's tough. I'm split between like 3 games right now. So it's like, it's hard to answer that question because there's only like 1 that's like really on my list in terms of like I actually want to get it done in 2024, and that's more related to some of the Lorcana stuff and like where I think that we can take that because it's a bit underdeveloped right now. It's kind of where Fab was in the early days. But in regards to Flesh and Blood, I mean, we came up with this idea a few years ago because we were doing the opposite of this, which is like, I really don't want to be a Flesh and Blood YouTuber. It's like not my goal. My main goal when it comes to the podcast is to make sure the podcast keeps on going, but also to provide as much value as possible to the patrons and make sure that we have like the high level and relevant deck techs for those marquee events. Outside of that, I mean, there's really no content that jumps out to me right at this moment that I want to make. I honestly, I pretty much don't like doing all YouTube stuff. I like doing podcasts, and that's probably that might be apparent at this point, but I just really, really don't like. I don't want to be a YouTuber, and it took us and it took me a few years to realize that it's like I'm not a YouTuber. I'm a podcaster, and the podcast happens to go on YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, I've really enjoyed making content for YouTube, particularly gameplays and
the gameplays are fun. Yeah.
Deck deck tech related stuff. I mean, my favorite video, it's not this year, it was the very tail end of last year that I've made, was the Kano deep dive, like the ultimate guide to
most
Kano.
watched video, by the way. I don't know if you saw that.
It was our most watched video.
It was our most watched video in 2023. I got a little notification from YouTube, or like I saw on the analytics board, but yeah. I don't know if you need that.
If you haven't seen, I mean, go check it out. I would also love to hear if there's people, I assume, just based on the views, this is stuff people want more of, but this is something that I would like to make for another hero in 2024. So that's on my radar, plus some more gameplays. I enjoy the YouTube content. It's honestly, my struggle is just finding time to be able to do it. So, and 2024 for me is going to be the busiest year from a career standpoint. So, I'm TBC on how I'm going to make this all work.
What about tier lists, reacts, news, all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, that's all coming.
Okay,
Bugger off. We're never doing any of that. Even when you ask me about like who's my player of the year, I'm like, this is encroaching on on foreign soil here. I'm not sure I want to, but I shout out to Yuki because Yuki's just had an insane year. So I mean, look, a lot of people have had insane years, but I had one last thing to shout out before we drop off, which is just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's reached out to us this year in terms of whether it's been at events, they've come up to us and have a chat, they've messaged us on Twitter, on Discord, they've been in our Patreon Discord, they've asked us questions on YouTube, they've emailed us questions, they've sent us questions through Patreon. People reach out to us in so many different ways, and I just want to say a massive thank you. We try to get to everything that we can. It's not always possible, and so if we've ever missed your question or not replied to your DM or whatever it is, like it's not personal. It's just because we've literally just not had the time to reply to everything, but we do try and reply. So I don't know what's like. I honestly think that like if you're in our Discord, that's the easiest way to get your sort of questions or queries or whatever read, heard, answered by us. So if you're there, otherwise YouTube I think is the other one.
Yeah, I would just say that if you ever see us at an in-person event,
that's the easiest.
And you're considering, you're like, am I going to annoy them? They look busy. You should probably come up. Because honestly,
come say hi.
The interpersonal personal interactions that we have at these events are pretty core to the reason of like why we do this. Like it's very unique and like it's never inconvenient, and it's probably the most rewarding part of doing this podcast is meeting people who listen to the podcast in person. So if you've ever been hesitant, shy, or you think that it's like something that's inconvenient to us, it's definitely not. And I would encourage you to come up in person if you want to.
That one, 1,000%. All right, Brendan, why don't you take us out?
All right. Well, if you're listening to this and you enjoyed, number one thing you can do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There's a video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/ArsenalPass. Subscribe while you're there. We got Brendan APG on Twitter, Finn_Dale. And once again, a big thank you to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. You help us do what we do as we approach episode 156 here pretty soon, which is 3 years, which is pretty crazy, to be honest. I think it all started back in the day when I was driving up to Colorado. I was listening to a little podcast called Session Blood. Had some man cooking me on a psyop with Viscera and what was the card? Sutcliffe's Research Notes. It was. He was just like talking about the potential of this card, and 3 years later we're still on the Unified Decree psyop. So
may it continue.
All right, thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.